It was a startling admission. Yes, MI5 said the Manchester Arena bomber could have and should have been stopped.
I am profoundly sorry that MI5 did not prevent the attack.
For the families of the 22 victims, it was, of course, very, very difficult news to hear.
You know, ultimately what they're saying is your children might have survived. You know, we might not be sitting here, you might not have spent nearly the last 6 years going through this hell.
Also on News at 10. Controversy tonight as Sue Gray, the civil servant who investigated Partygate under Boris Johnson, becomes the Labour leader's new chief of staff. Charged the missing couple whose baby was found dead in woods in Brighton. The son and heir of the former Shah of Iran on the chaos now engulfing the country he was once born to rule.
On the streets, when they chant death to the dictator, is a clear message to the whole world. We had enough with these people.
And
you're lost, you can look, and you will find me time after time.
the haunting voice of Eva Cassidy, remastered in the year she would have been 60.
This is On TV, News at 10, with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. After two previous phases of the inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing nearly 6 years ago, there was one major question left to answer. Could Salman Abedi have been stopped before he killed 22 people at a pop concert packed with teenagers? Well, today, MI5 made an unprecedented apology after the inquiry chairman said, yes, indeed, he could. Sir John Saunders said the security service had received a vital piece of intelligence, but its slow response led to a significant missed opportunity to prevent the attack. As for who radicalised Abedi, Sir John blamed the bomber's parents, but said the mosque Abedi attended in nearby Disbury had shown a willful blindness to activities there.
Police emergency, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, there's been an explosion at Manchester Arena!
More than 2,000 days on, we learned today how things might have been so different.
Is anybody injured?
Yes, loads! There's loads injured.
How a chance to prevent the attack at Manchester Arena was missed.
It's absolutely manic!
Wearing wires around his waist and a homemade bomb in his rucksack, it was Salman Abedi who attacked the concert venue. But the questions answered today were not only about him, but about the unnameable intelligence officers tasked with keeping Britain safe.
Oh my God. What's going on? What just happened?
The families of his victims will never hear some of the secret evidence heard by the inquiry. But its chairman concluded today that MI5 missed a significant opportunity to prevent the attack.
It is not possible to reach any conclusion on the balance of probabilities or to any other evidential standard as to whether the attack would have been prevented. However, there was a realistic possibility that actionable intelligence could have been obtained which might have led to actions preventing the attack.
The report found that the security services failed to act on two pieces of intelligence received in the months before the attack, but couldn't reveal the details. Had intelligence been reported more promptly, it could have led to Abedi being stopped at Manchester Airport on his return from Libya 4 days before the bombing. Neither piece of intelligence was shared with counter-terrorism police. Relatives of some of the victims held flowers. Others held back tears as they responded to what they'd heard.
This is a devastating conclusion for us. The failures exposed in this report are unacceptable. The public are entitled to expect that information of national security importance will be acted on speedily and, crucially, that the system will ensure that this happens.
MI5 says more than 100 improvements have been made since the attack. 3 years after it happened, ITV News went inside the agency, witnessing it at work for the first time. But after today's report, a rare public comment from its director, an unprecedented apology for what went wrong.
MI5 exists to stop atrocities. To all those whose lives were forever changed on that awful night, I am so sorry that MI5 did not prevent the attack at the Manchester Arena. I deeply regret that such intelligence was not obtained.
Chloe Rutherford and her boyfriend Liam Curry were among the 22 people killed at the concert. The teenagers' parents say they cannot forget and will not forgive.
It's absolutely devastating to think that it could have been stopped. That wasn't the only opportunity. There was other opportunities right up until moments before. So, but it starts with them, doesn't it? It starts with that significant missed. It's unforgivable, unforgivable.
You know, ultimately what they're saying is your children might have survived. You know, we might not be sitting here. You might not have spent nearly the last 6 years going through this hell. That's a bit of a hard pill to swallow, to be honest, yeah.
For some of the victims' families, it is distressing, and for MI5, it is damaging. Today's report is an important moment in the process of grieving and learning, but it's not the end.
And Rohit joins us now. I mean, Rohit, some questions answered there. Maybe frustrating, of course, that we can't see the intelligence and, you know, see exactly what was missed, though obviously everyone understands the reasons. But how confident are we, therefore, how confident are you, therefore, that those kind of mistakes couldn't happen again, or could they?
Well, you know, these recommendations are all about trying to make that less likely. But we saw today that mistakes were made, that things could and should have been different. We saw also potentially the gravest consequences of opportunities being missed. But something also to say, which, you know, we really picked up during our time a few years ago filming inside MI5, which you saw in that report, is that this sort of hypothetical situation where intelligence agencies can reach a situation where terrorist atrocities become impossible is simply considered by everyone in this field to be unrealistic. Of course, part of the job of intelligence agencies is not only deciding what to look at, but what not to look at, and that's where a problem was made here. Of course, resources are part of the assessment, but this is all coming at a time when intelligence agencies are being asked to do more in terms of Iran, Russia, and China too. So here we have a situation where, you know, this private agency is under public scrutiny following this public inquiry, which was held largely in private.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Some politics now, and wait for the Sue Gray report became a running government response to questions about what Boris Johnson did or didn't know of parties in Downing Street during lockdown. You will not have forgotten it. Deja vu, flashback. It's all coming back now. 6 weeks after the senior civil servant delivered her findings, he was, of course, gone even. Now she is swapping Whitehall, that bastion of impartiality, for Westminster to work for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, at his side as his chief of staff.
She was a civil servant who became a household name. Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties in Downing Street contributed to the downfall of a Prime Minister.
I, Mr. Speaker, I am humbled and I have learned a lesson, Mr. Speaker.
But tonight she quit the civil service to become Chief of Staff to Labour leader Keir Starmer, a move that's angered some Conservative MPs.
That was one of the most politically sensitive inquiries for many decades. And I think, I'm afraid, what's happened now does call into question her impartiality.
What are you suggesting, that the whole investigation now is flawed and should be undone?
I'm afraid that many people will think that this is a serious question mark over that investigation. And it is unhelpful for it to become known that the person in charge of it obviously held very strongly partisan political views.
But others say it was Sue Gray's reputation for impartiality that led Boris Johnson to appoint her in the first place.
He had the confidence in Sue Gray at that time because she had unimpeachable integrity. She had a reputation for the role that she has undertaken in government, and the Prime Minister rightly had confidence in her to carry out that investigation and deliver that report. The idea somehow that this appointment now taints that is just fanciful.
Before news of Sue Gray's new job, the former Prime Minister was back in Westminster, finally ready to declare his thoughts on Rishi Sunak's new deal on Northern Ireland.
It acts as a drag anchor on divergence, and which, as I say, is the point of Brexit. There's no point in Brexit unless you do things differently.
But he knows there's not much appetite for a rebellion.
It is clear that this is where people are now. And it's clear from this room that this is what people people want to move on.
So do you think
they want to do a deal? They don't want any more ructions, and I get that. I totally get that, and I've got to be realistic.
For now, his return to government looks unlikely, but his supporters might try and disrupt the appointment of the woman they believe brought him down. Harry Horton, News at 10.
And Robert is here to talk about all this. Sue Gray working for Keir Starmer. Bit of a surprise, is it not?
Well, it's very unusual for somebody as senior as that within the civil service to jump straight from Whitehall, where you're supposed to be impartial, to a straightforwardly political job for the leader of the opposition. Now, let's be clear, civil servants in the past have moved into political jobs. You may remember quite recently, Dan Rosenfeld was Chief of Staff for Boris Johnson, and he was an official in the Treasury. Now, actually, he left the Treasury and worked in the City for a bit, but nobody at that point said the entire civil service is filled with Tories in the way that some Tories are tonight saying the fact that Sue Gray is going to work for Keir Starmer means that she must be one of many appalling lefties that infect the civil service. I mean, it has caused a massive furore. Jacob Rees-Mogg tonight has said that her report into Partygate, we talked about it night after night, must now be called into question. And therefore, allies of Boris Johnson are saying, our hero Boris Johnson was innocent. This was all a Labour Party stitch-up. Jacob Rees-Mogg, though, made the, I have to say, frankly, bizarre claim that it was that report that led to Boris Johnson being ousted. It wasn't. What led to Boris Johnson being ousted was the subsequent revelation that he knew that his deputy chief whip had been a predator in the past, but had sort of denied it and appointed him as deputy chief whip. That's what did for Boris Johnson. But you can just see the extent to which this appointment is reigniting all those divisions within the Tory party. So the one person who I think must be feeling slightly anxious about all of this tonight is Rishi Sunak, who thought he'd brought calm to the Tory party and perhaps had consigned Boris Johnson to the dustbin of history.
And very briefly, I didn't quite work out today, is Boris Johnson going to oppose Rishi Sunak's deal or not?
Look, I listened to his speech. It felt to me like classic Boris Johnson, having your cake and eat it. He's saying that he doesn't like the Brexit deal, the Northern Ireland Protocol deal that Rishi Sunak has done. He'd have done it differently himself. But he also recognises that so many MPs want to move on. So I got the sense that he will stir up a bit of trouble, make trouble. I mean, one of the things he also said today, which I thought was quite striking, was he felt, apropos of nothing, he wanted to point out that when he left as leader of the Tory party and left as Prime Minister, the Tories were not quite as far behind Labour as they are today. He hasn't given up his ambitions to be Prime Minister, but I think he's just in the business of making life difficult for Rishi Sunak at the moment, rather than launching what you might call a coup.
It's almost quite a good Boris Johnson impression, but we'll leave that for another time. Now, the Department of Health has made an offer to nearly all the health unions involved in strikes. Not more money, not yet anyway, but an invitation to sit down and talk. There was one string attached, that planned strikes would have to be called off. Ambulance workers' leaders are deciding whether to call off theirs next week. We understand tonight that government officials would offer a one-off payment similar to that offered to nurses. Junior doctors who held their talks today say their strike will go ahead as planned after theirs ended without progress. Yesterday's very sad discovery of a baby's body in woods near Brighton has led to a string of charges against the arrested couple who had been on the run for the past 2 months. Constance Martin, an aristocrat's daughter, and her partner Mark Gordon will appear in court in the morning. Ellie is in Brighton tonight. Ellie, can you bring us up to speed?
Well, police had been searching for Constance Martin and Mark Gordon as they travelled down the country after their car was discovered near Bolton on the 5th of January. On Monday, they were arrested here in Brighton, and yesterday, officers discovered the remains of a baby in Woodland. Now, a post-mortem is yet to take place, but detectives told a press conference today they believe the infant had been dead for several weeks. Tonight, a vigil for the child was held at a church nearby, and flowers and candles have been placed here as tributes. A few hours ago, the Crown Prosecution Service authorised the Met Police to charge the pair with gross negligence manslaughter, concealing the birth of a child and perverting the course of justice. They'll appear before Brighton Magistrates Court in the morning.
OK, Ellie, thank you very much indeed. Now, when the former Yorkshire bowler Azeem Rafiq insisted the club and some players had been racist towards him, it stunned the game. 2.5 years on, English cricket has begun its formal investigation. Most of the former teammates who Rafiq accused have pulled out of the process because they don't believe it's fair. The former England captain, Michael Vaughan, though, wants to clear his name. Today, his lawyer cross-examined Rafiq's friend Adil Rashid about the remarks Vaughan is said to have made.
Former Ashes-winning captain Michael Vaughan preparing to defend his reputation over a charge of using racist or discriminatory language towards a group of Asian teammates. An allegation made by Azeem Rafiq that Vaughan has always denied.
We see Vaughan here shaking hands.
Specifically, he's accused of saying there's too many of you lot before a game in 2009. One of Yorkshire's players that day, Adil Rashid, was cross-examined today via video link.
Rashid is spinning a web here.
Currently in Bangladesh, Rashid denied suggestions he'd been pressured by Rafiq to back the allegation because of personal details Rafiq knew about him or that they were in business together. Rashid said he did not believe Vaughan was racist, and what was said was a poor attempt at humour. Vaughan's barrister, Christopher Stoner KC, asked Rashid, "Do you remember other jokes?" "I can't recall," Rashid replied. "Why remember this one?" "It stuck in my head." Later, Stoner said, "This is the reality. You have no clear recollection of what was said." "I have a very clear recollection," was Rashid's response. Under his cross-examination, Azeem Rafiq was asked why he didn't discuss the alleged comments at the time. He said Michael Vaughan was a hero of his. He was a young cricketer wanting to make his way. And he added, "As we've seen, when you do speak up, your career and your life can be destroyed." Rafiq met Vaughan to discuss the allegation and they were photographed together. Rafiq told the hearing he regretted that moment, claiming Vaughan then attempted to discredit him. He also said Vaughan's apology was actually a non-apology. Tomorrow, Michael Vaughan will finally get a chance to give his side of the story. Steve Scott, News at 10.
There was good news and bad news for us here at ITV today. The good, the millions invested in the new streaming service, ITVX, looked to have been a canny bet as it has been beating expectations in a crowded market. The bad, the investment in X and the challenging economic climate overall meant profits were down.
Action. Trigger Point is back in production. The last series on ITV was watched by an average audience of 9.5 million. ITV can still pull in the punters, but competition from Netflix, Amazon, Apple and even YouTube is intense. ITV's boss insists the company can compete.
Our shows get far bigger audiences than the streamers, far bigger. And even on our streaming service, we get higher audiences per show. And we don't just do drama, right? We do live sport, we do news, we do daytime, we do soaps. We have a very, very broad portfolio of programming.
ITVX is ITV's effort to turbocharge its streaming offering. The Upton family in Leeds have registered. They also pay for subscriptions for Disney+, Amazon and Netflix. 90% of the programmes they now watch are streamed rather than scheduled.
I can just log on whenever I want and watch whatever I want when I want. For live TV, it's live, so it's a matter of watching it when it's on. And if you miss it, you miss it.
ITVX has 10.5 million active monthly users. ITV plans to double this to 20 million in the next 3 years, and it needs to, because the decline of traditional scheduled TV viewing appears to be speeding up. For the last decade or so, the number of commercial programmes attracting 5 million viewers or more held pretty steady at around 800 a year until recently. Last year, there were just 233, of which 223 were on ITV. The rest were on Channel 4.
You can't fight the fact that viewers have lots of other places to go. The fact that we've got ITVX is a tool for us to retain viewers.
But total hours watched across all ITV output, whether that's linear, digital, on demand, that's everything, fell again last year.
It will continue to fall. The most important thing we can do is to ensure that we have got as many opportunities to keep and to attract new viewers.
OK, we now have 6 brand new contestants.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is a popular ITV programme. Another series has been recorded with Jeremy Clarkson as host. ITV will air it despite the newspaper column Clarkson wrote recently about the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle.
We criticised the comments he made in The Sun, and we said it had no place on ITV. We've said everything we're going to say on that.
Viewers are migrating to digital platforms and advertising money is following them. The pace of change has accelerated, but ITV insists it can keep up. The other public service broadcasters need to as well. John Hills, News at 10.
It is hard to see how the violent 6-month-long suppression of protests in Iran is going to end. Amnesty International said today nearly 100 Iranians had been executed since the start of the year. Others, as Lucy reported 2 nights ago, are being tortured. But she's also been talking to a leading Iranian opposition figure, the son of the last Shah of Iran. The Shah himself, of course, was driven from power in the Iranian Revolution of '79 in scenes not dissimilar to the ones we see today. He had a dismal human rights record accumulated over decades of autocratic rule. But now, in a perhaps unlikely twist, his son, Reza Pahlavi, says he desperately wants help from Western governments to bring democracy to Iran.
The burning of headscarves has been an act of defiance for those pushing back against Iran's stifling regime. It has also emboldened others to push for real political change in the country.
It's truly a revolution, first of its kind in the world, led by women. Right now, the demand on the streets, when they chant death to the dictator, is a clear message to the whole world. We had enough with these people. We want to get rid of them.
Reza Pahlavi is the son and heir of the last Shah of Iran, who was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution in 1979 after growing political unrest. People deeply unhappy with his dictatorship. Protest was part of that revolution too, as was death and violence. But Reza Pahlavi believes the bravery from the people this time around is unflinching.
It's always been for a purpose, therefore I'm not afraid, and I'm willing to risk my life if so needed.
The prince is in Europe to urge leaders to help his campaign for a secular, democratic Iran.
Right now, do you think that the West is doing enough?
The regime is testing. It has always tested the Western resolve to stand firm vis-à-vis them, and every time that you show laxity or hesitation or weakness, they have taken every advantage of it.
Can you see this progressing to a real conflict, a war?
I'm afraid it becomes more plausible. It will be historically criminal not to at least give this process a chance. Now, an opportunity to finally bring this regime down to its knees. That's what I'm pleading for the sake of humanity.
For the past 4 decades, autocratic clerical leaders have been in control, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, as their enforcers.
Putting the IRGC on the terrorist list means more assets could be frozen, more assets could be confiscated. And that can, by itself, generate more means to support the Iranian people more directly.
It is women's rights that are also at the core of this uprising. After Mahsa Amini died in police custody, arrested for not wearing her headscarf properly.
You have 3 daughters, and albeit they have grown up in the West, do they wear a headscarf?
If they ever thought that I expected them to wear a headscarf, there would be pandemonium in my house. No, it's a choice at the end of the day. But it should not be in any form or shape a symbol of assimilation or subjugation.
The exiled Crown Prince wants to help guide the transition to a new system in Iran.
When you go to bed at night, what is the dream?
What I've always stated in 40 years and counting as my only mission in life is to see to it that Iranians get their chance to vote their future through the ballot box. And if we achieve that, that's where I would say, check mark, the dream you asked for.
A prince's hand now strengthened by a generation of Iranians wanting a different future. Lucy Watson, News at 10.
Eurovision fans will need to be on standby next Tuesday. Tickets will go on sale at noon. They'll need plenty of money too. For the semi-finals, tickets will cost up to £290 and up to £380 for the grand final. Finally, the pure, haunting voice of singer Eva Cassidy captivated fans before cancer claimed her life when she'd only lived it for 33 years. If anything, though, her popularity grew after her death. The sale of 12 million albums testifies to that. A new one is released tomorrow. That voice is clearer and stronger than ever, thanks to cutting-edge technology. In what would have been the year of her 60th birthday, her work has been given the accolade of being accompanied by the London Symphony Orchestra.
If you're lost, you can look and you will find me time after time.
The passing of time has only elevated her reputation. During Eva Cassidy's lifetime, she struggled to get a recording contract, was mostly unknown outside her home state in America. Now she is getting the full orchestral treatment. The singer, hailed by many as the voice of her generation, recorded her first live solo album in 1996, just months before her death from cancer at the age of 33. It has taken years and the latest technology to isolate her voice from that recording.
It's a process of trying to work out the huge amounts of extraneous sound on the original recordings and understand how we can separate things like the crowd on the live environment she was singing in and even the chatter and the plate and glass movement in the room.
This footage taken at that 1996 concert helped Eva Cassidy gain posthumous recognition for the power and emotion of her vocals. For the London Symphony Orchestra, more used to having a singer present in the studio, recording with her voice was a privilege and a responsibility.
What would you say to people who would argue her voice was so pure, so clear, it was good enough as it is, you don't need to do anything to it?
I think with music, there's always a chance to enrich the music. I think she would have really loved to have, you know, some beautiful string accompaniment. I just think it just adds another beautiful layer to her artistry, and I really hope she would have just been so thrilled to, you know, it's a shame she's not a part of it.
It is, says the man who played piano on the original recordings, exactly what Eva Cassidy would have been doing today.
I think she would have really dug this new album, though. I think it's just a really cool thing. So that's, to me, the future of her thing. It's just this kind of constant turning over from generation to generation, just like all the great singers.
There'll be no crying.
She tragically never lived to fulfil her dreams of recording with the full orchestra, but Eva Cassidy's extraordinary voice endures. Nina Nanar, News at 10.
What a haunting A lovely story. A good place to end. Good night. Thanks for watching.